Hey, Upper East Siders and all you scandal-loving listeners out there. You just tuned into the non-judging breakfast pod, where the coffee is strong, the waffles are fresh, and the gossip is hotter than ever. My name is Leif, and I'm your seasoned Gossip Girl veteran. But I'm not alone. With me is my co-host, fellow brunch enthusiast, Steve.
And I'm taking in the gossip for the first time.
We're going to be working our way through the iconic 2000s TV series Gossip Girl, one takedown at a time.
We will be dissecting each piece of juicy gossip and analyzing storylines, all while admiring and sometimes mocking the fabulous fashion, devious schemes, and petty rivalries.
All right, Steve. This week we are tackling the second episode of season 1, The Wild Brunch. And do you know what this title is reference to?
I'm assuming The Wild Bunch, which is a film that I don't believe I've seen, but I've heard of.
You are correct. It is a 1969 Western. Don't really know any of the actors. They're old. Like I recognize the one guy, but he's probably much younger. Ernest Borgnine.
Oh, Ernest Borgnine? Yeah. Which Ernest Borgnine was the guy getting hired to be the old guy in movies by the time I was into movies.
Exactly. I'm sure he was much younger in this movie.
Yeah. I imagine that in the 60s. I imagine in the decades prior to my birth.
Anyway, so this episode was written by Josh Schwartz and Stephanie Savage, and once again directed by our friend Mark Pisnarski. The episode summary is: in the wake of a scandalous kiss on the lips party, Serena receives an icy cold reception from Blair. The original air date was September 25th, 2007. Do you remember what you were doing on September 25th, 2007?
September 25th, 2007. I had just started a promotion. My daughter was an infant, and I was had just become, and it was like I was an assistant principal of a school, but they didn't want to pay me like an assistant principal, so they called me an academic coordinator, and then promoted me to be a site administrator. Definitely not a principal. But yeah, I mean that was, and that I was working out of South Philly High, not for South Philly High, but our program was stationed in South Philly High. And yeah, I was cutting my teeth in a brand new job trying to learn how to be an administrator, and I discovered I didn't like it. I discovered I didn't like being the boss at the school. I was also about to turn 30 and the youngest person on staff. So it was weird to be the boss to a bunch of people that were 8 to 15 years older than me.
So at that time, I had just dropped out of college, and I was not doing much at all, except for probably watching bad TV. But I had not yet discovered Gossip Girl. It was still a couple years to come.
Yeah. Yeah, I had heard about it. And there was another show around the time that I was into, and I was trying to think of this the other day, and it made me think like, oh, I'd probably really like Gossip Girl, but then I never.
So I think I know what show you probably were watching, because I also watched it, and it was Smallville.
Yes.
And Gossip Girl was on the first. It was like the flagship show of the switch over to the CW when the UPN and WB merged. And Smallville came
Oh.
over. So there was lots of advertisements for Gossip Girl while watching Smallville.
Although, well, hold on. But here's the thing. I was probably off of Smallville by then, because I was into Smallville for 3 seasons. And season 3, I was really excited because I thought it really started to take off. And then after that, I thought they were getting away from the, like, hey, who are we hanging out with this week? So that we can just, like, take care of him now, because that new person that we're going to introduce in the opening credits is our villain this week. Like, I got really tired of that. And when Jeff Loeb came on and as a producer, I felt like it really started to take a more storyline approach and a more, serial approach. And then it just didn't. And also, like, Lana, by the time I was done watching the show, Lana should already have had severe brain trauma from the amount of times that not only she was concussed, but just otherwise given amnesia. She should barely be a functioning human being.
Which she did go into coma a couple times, but
sure, eventually.
But yeah, so she did stay on a little too long. But just quick off topic, it was mainly behind the scenes reasons, because the WB was not allowed to use Lois Lane in more than a certain amount of episodes, blah blah blah, because she was reserved for the movie side of things, and there's all these backscene politics going on. But that's for another podcast.
Yeah.
Anyways, I will read the episode description or summary here. The truth is out. Serena tries to make up with Blair until she reveals that she knows what happened between Serena and Nate. Nate makes an attempt to talk to Serena only to run into Dan. Jenny hopes to find out if Chuck is spreading rumors, which leads her to Blair's house. Nevertheless, all will be resolved by brunch, complete with champagne, a dress code, and 100 of their closest friends. Or will it? Serena and Dan are shunned by Blair and her crew. Chuck tries to convince Blair to finish it with Nate. Serena and Nate finally sit down and talk. However, why is Serena heading up to Chuck's suite? And why is Lily Vanderwoodson sneaking around with Bart Bass?
Oh my God, I can't wait till we get to that scene. That was one of my favorites.
All right, well, we'll go right into it here. So this week, instead of the normal cold open the Gossip Girl has, they did some long 2.5-minute recap, which was kind of strange. That's a one-off and done, though.
Well, and I feel like it's a very pilot thing, where you're like, when in the era where you're still having to catch people week by week, and you have to, like, catch them up. Anyone that tuned in for week 1 that turned in for week 2 that didn't turn in for week 1, okay, we really need to get them caught up.
Well, the thing is that they do, like, if you're watching on TV, they did do recaps.
Yeah, I mean, they did. And, yeah, I'm not saying it isn't.
It was an odd choice, and it never came back, so.
Well, much like at the beginning of the cold open, non-cold open in this one, where they do the flashes of the episode, which I know we talk about. We will talk about.
All right. So, anyways, we hop right into Act 1. We get some NYC establishing shots with Gossip Girl monologue, a montage of brunch prep.
Yeah, I think we might actually get our first glimpse of the statues in that prep. And it's like, wait, was that and then it's just like a quick flash.
It made me hungry, at least. I was ready for brunch.
The food and the food prep, just like
that giant, huge salmon.
Yeah. It just, although, yeah, that's Robin's thing. I don't enjoy the salmon the way Robin does. Early on in our relationship, she introduced me to it, and I was like, I gave it a shot. I gave it an open mind. I don't like fish for breakfast.
Moving to the Brooklyn loft, we see a neat garage door open between Dan and Jenny's bedrooms. A sweet scene of Dan checking in on Jenny after the incident with Chuck. Jenny snarks back about Dan's awkward wave at the end of last night's date.
Yeah, which was fantastic. The end of that date was fantastic, and like the wave. So when they the interaction between Dan and Jenny is just fantastic too.
I love their brother and sister dynamic.
Yeah, they have the best relationship on the show right now. The most honest, the most loving and caring relationship. And yes, it's a brother-sister relationship, but like they're just, the way he checks in on her and the way that she, is beating herself up. Like, man, I like kind of knowing this guy has a reputation.
I'm actually going to disagree a little bit because we actually get the direct parallel with Serena and Eric in the next scene.
Okay, that's you know what? That's very fair. And the reason that at this point we have not seen them as much.
Yes.
Because you see the Dan and Jenny relationship more in the first episode and more in this episode later on, if I remember correctly.
Yes, but like I think in the pilot we get the fact that Serena self-exiled for what happened at the Shepherd wedding, but the reason why she was willing to come back is because of her brother.
Right. Yeah, and we really get that impression from her. And yes, they definitely do have that relationship too. Which, it's really how you hope siblings are,
Yes.
It's
Then we get the flashback to the wave. We see Serena get out of the cab. The cab starts to leave, but Dan stops the cab. He slams into the seat, and then he looks out. He gives a little like awkward wave, and she's like, "What the fuck are you doing, dude?"
Yeah, yeah, and then and then it just drives off. It was that whole setup. Starting with slamming the door on his head, like go get her. Oh, okay. Boom, and like it was every moment of it is just choreographed perfectly.
Yes, and then so we're at the Palace Hotel. We see the direct parallel with Serena Eric. They're recapping the now infamous wave.
Yeah, yeah, and again, just really great. Just one of like that super awkward, oh my God, I've ruined this forever feeling as it pulls away. Yeah, just perfect.
But as we see, Serena is obviously still interested, and she thinks that from that wave that she thinks Dan might not be interested.
Yeah, and so both of them are feeling the same way 100%. They're both really into the other person and think the other person isn't into them, which it really is some great.
The classic.
Yeah.
Trope. And then so we go from there. Jenny convinces Dan to go for a second shot with Serena, but he couldn't. He should shower and change first. So he is, which is he just got up, so probably wants to get a shower first and put on some clothes.
Yeah, exactly.
And we move to Blair is with her minions at the Waldorf penthouse. Blair makes several snarky comments to them about how Serena shouldn't dare to show up at today's big brunch.
I will take the opportunity here to mention that Blair had a huge grammatical faux pas that I can't turn the English teacher off, and Blair actually uses the word whom incorrectly. She says, my boyfriend, whom I love, and who loves me. She's using whom when it should be who because it's a nominative case that is referring back to the boyfriend. So it's like naming something. So he is the subject of that clause of the sentence.
Well, we'll just make sure we leave that off of Blair's Yale application. Unfortunately, this is starting a theme in the episode that I don't really like that goes throughout the episode and kind of throughout the series and the show, is that Serena is blamed for what happened at the Shepherd wedding, but Nate is not.
Yes, that got me even in the pilot when they're sitting down to dinner and he's like, I'll never talk to her again, and it's like, okay, and like and there is that piece of it that it's like Blair taking the power dynamic and recognizing like, okay, this is we're the power couple, so I have to let him go. But it is like he just pretty much gets off scot-free for like being the one who cheated. You know, he's the one that did the greater wrong. He's the one that was in the relationship that was committed and not supposed to do that. You know? Like, granted, it's grimy to sleep with your best friend's partner. It's like it's grimy to be the partner.
Yeah, I think they're equally culpable.
Yeah, yeah, and they both, yeah, and Nate gets off scot-free.
Yeah. Anyways, and at the end of the scene, Blair calls Nate, and that leads right into the next scene where Nate wakes up after a bender. He is at Chuck's suite, and the sound of the phone call from Blair wakes him up. Chuck wakes up in a bed with two women and a black guy. Both are clearly hungover. As the women leave, we learn that they are employees at Chuck's father's hotel.
Yeah.
So he is sleeping with employees, and he says he'll let his father know that they did a good job.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
yeah.
Chuck's still a creep.
He is still a creep. There's also mention in that where once again he doesn't know who Dan. He's like, if I knew who that guy was, if I knew his name, I'd go find him. If I knew who that guy was, playing off of the whole like they rode the bus together, and he's like, why are you following us? So it is like that recurring thing.
And then Nate kind of jokes, what are you gonna do? Choke him with your scarf?
Yeah,
because
yeah.
Obviously Chuck is not gonna be beating up anyone.
Yeah.
He's a bit posh for that.
Yeah, Chuck wants to sound tough.
Yeah. All right, so back at the loft, Dan has spruced up. We get a whirlwind of dialogue where Dan once again checks in on Jenny's mental state before heading off to find Serena. However, Jenny quickly hops up and says, wait, there's someone I want to talk to. Rufus arrives back to the loft as both his children are leaving. Rufus is alone with his sad waffles.
Yeah. the just dadding his heart out. Just like always trying to be super dad in these situations, and the poor fucking guy just like his kids are like, yeah, we get it. And like it speaks to me as a dad who I feel has a good relationship with my kids, only I'm the parent who I didn't have to full-time parent when it was the toughest time, except for in the summer.
Yeah.
But like it does speak to that, like now having teenagers, and it's like, hey, you want to come down and visit? Like, yeah, I can't wait to see you. And my kids will come down, they'll hang out with me, but my daughter comes down and hangs out, but she also is going out with friends, and like,
yeah,
and which I love that she does, and I love that she has friends down here. But it is a lot of the times like, okay. Like I get, like it just speaks to that.
Yes. So we get a quick shot of Nate. He's back in the suite. He's trying to track down Serena's room number using Chuck's pool as the son of the hotel owner. So that's just a quick shot, but we can see it.
Yeah.
So he's clearly still interested in Serena. And we see Blair deleting a missed call from Serena. She's back at the penthouse. Then a weird montage showing what we learn are glimpses of later in the episode. Is this the news teasing the top story until the final segment?
Yeah, it was really it was an interesting choice. It was, and my thought is this going to be a thing? Like, is this just something that they do? And 'cause on the one hand, it did have a feel of like more like old timey dramas that would sometimes be like, and also it's funny because now it kind of mirrors reality TV. You know, if you watch something like 90 Day Fiance, and if you're forced to watch something like 90 Day Fiance because it's on while your wife is watching it and you don't turn it off, and you start getting into it because you watch it too much. But like you see the same scene 20 times before it actually plays out. They're constantly like, the beginning of the episode, this is all the stuff we're going to show you today. And then they're like constantly showing you previews of what's going to happen later in the same episode, But yeah, it was an interesting choice.
Yeah, so like the extended recap, it never comes back. All right, and we are back from commercial, and Act 2 begins with Serena and Lily are arguing at their suite at the palace. Lily wants Serena to go to breakfast.
Yeah. Her insistence on going to this brunch and like the just dire need for it. It's like, lady, like your kid wants to skip brunch. And like Blair, I'm sorry, Serena pointing out the hypocrisy of like, oh, you can't just hide away from your problems. Like, you are literally hiding my brother away.
Yes. She's very big on public image, clearly.
Yeah. Obsessed with it. And like, and yeah. And we'll get to more later on that.
Yes. And we get a quick shot of Serena leaving the hotel just as Dan is arriving, and they kind of miss each other. So that was a missed opportunity. And then we get Dan approaching the same doorman from last week, and he's surprised that the doorman's still kind of treating him hostilely.
Yeah. But clearly that doorman has no care for.
Yes.
I mean, to be fair,
he takes his job seriously.
To be fair, Dan's from Brooklyn.
He is dressed rather shabbily.
Yeah, I mean, he is a little out of place.
And then we see Lily coming down to the lobby. She meets Nate, who she seems very fond of him. But Lily is not nearly as happy to see Dan. We see some uncomfortable vibes between Dan and Nate as they are forced to wait together.
Yeah, and there's even that there's a conversation. I can't remember if it has already happened or if it is going to happen with Lily and Serena, where she talks about like, Nate wouldn't be too bad a catch. Like kind of indicates that, man, I wish that you weren't already with Blair. Because, like, I would...
Listen, the conversation is that I kind of think Serena's always had a bit of a crush on you, Nate.
Yeah, that's...
Which, thank God Serena's not here, because, Mom!
Yeah. That is the line, and like... And it just says so much about Lily and how much Lily it shows you also that Lily is not just that the parents aren't just observers, that they think that they're the players in this game. Like the parents think that their kids are going to are part of their social ladder, And
correct, yeah. And as we'll see later on in the series, I think it's kind of just a chain that's been passed down through the generations.
Yeah.
And we get the Dan and Nate together, and it's very awkward. Two obvious reasons. One, they're waiting for the same girl, and two, also Dan did punch Nate's best friend last night.
Yeah. And also, give it to Nate that he wasn't hostile. It was awkward, but he wasn't. But it was like he wasn't rude. He wasn't hostile, and it almost shows you like sometimes jokes got to get punched. Like part of being friends with Chuck is, yeah, I kind of got to be grumpy at people because they punch him, but people are gonna punch him.
Yeah, I mean, he clearly said. I think he says later in the episode, you punched the guy's sister. I mean, you went after the guy's sister. What do you expect, or something like that?
Yeah. He specifically, he calls him out on that. Yeah.
All right, so then we go to Serena arriving at the Blair's penthouse to try to mend fences with Blair, and figures out figures out why Blair is mad at her this time. Blair reveals that she knows about the Nate and Serena of it all. So we get the big. Everyone now knows.
Yeah, it is all out. Well, of course, except for Lily. Because,
well, I mean,
but that's important because of everything else that comes from Lily later.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, and yeah, it's all out. It's all out, and everybody knows. End of act.
Yes. Yeah, the setup is there. There's a quick act 2, so we're just gonna go right into act 3. Jenny arrives at Blair's penthouse. Jenny is fishing for info to see if Chuck has been talking about her. Once again, it is implied from Blair's comments that sexual assault is a regular thing with Chuck.
Yeah, and the line was, Blair's line was,
Chuck.
So it was so
brags about his conquest, but not his victims.
Yeah, he wants to brag about his conquests, but not his victims, and it's like, oh my god, like it just made every part of me just fucking seethe, and but it's like that is, once again, when we talk about like knowing those people back in our youth, that it's like, fuck, like you don't even know the shit that they were doing, Mm-hmm. Like there's more to Chuck that we don't know, like, and there's the stuff that he doesn't tell his friends. Like this is just the stuff that people know about. Is really, really creepy.
Anyways, we move on to the next scene. Lily meets Rufus on the streets in Brooklyn. Lily is unhappy about Dan and Serena dating. We get more angry flirting between the pair. When Lily says Serena doesn't need any new distractions right now, Rufus points out that Dan might just be a good influence for Serena.
That line was great. Like I think maybe Dan is exactly what Serena needs. And
Dan's a good kid.
Yeah. And Dan isn't caught up in all of the bullshit, and Dan isn't going to,
he's not out drinking at bars every night.
Yeah.
Like
exactly.
Every other kid in your life.
Yeah, like the people you want your kid hanging out with. Like, you want your kid involved in this scene that at surface level starts with getting them hooked on booze at 16, at 14.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and because the other thing is that in episode 1, none of these kids are strangers to drinking.
Yeah.
Like, can they all hold their liquor all the time? No. But are any of them strangers to drinking? No. Like, there's a familiarity to it. It is casual from the start.
Mm-hmm. All right, so then we see Dan and Nate clumsily talk about Serena outside the Palace Hotel. Chuck arrives and sparks fly between him and Dan. Dan, the nervous in every other aspect, is oddly confident with Chuck, though.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, what are the things that really make him nervous? Social situations, right? But what's the one thing that never makes him nervous? Jenny.
Yeah.
And when it comes to her, it's like, yep, everything else is shut off. I will stand my ground with this guy, and And again, it's about Dan not giving a shit about all of the pomp and all of the social scene. Like, I don't give a shit that you own this hotel. I like, none of that means anything to me, you know? And you're just a fucking creep who it's again a lot about Dan's character, you know?
Yes, I agree. And we see Jenny is helping Blair get dressed back at the penthouse. Jenny comments about Blair and Dan both having Cabbage Patch Kids. Put a pin in this. Jenny once again plays the game and is rewarded with a custom Eleanor Waldorf dress.
And the thing is, that dress is not a dress, no strings attached. Blair says, "I'm sure you'll find a way to repay me." Mm-hmm. And whether or not a specific situation comes up that refers to that dress, I don't know and can't remember if it did, or if it just drops off the face of the earth and we never hear about it again. Either way, it establishes that friendship with Blair is transactionary. You know? Yes. There is a power game there at all times.
Well, we see Blair immediately perk up when she mentions Dan, her brother, is the one that was with Serena.
Yeah.
Says, I got it in there. So that's when she realized she can, now use Jenny. And we do find out, so in the end of the episode, skipping ahead a little bit, in the Gossip Girl monologue, they mention how a Blair or an Eleanor Waldorf original is, a sign that you're one of Blair's minions, essentially.
It's right then. It is right then when she gives her the dress.
I thought that was at the end.
No, she actually says right when she gives her the dress, she says, she says like, and it is the staple uniform of anyone of Blair's like army or something like that.
There's actually like a Star Wars. Well, at the end is the Star Wars reference. So like Serena's rebels or Blair's empire.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Anyways, back to Gossip Girl. Dan is still outside the hotel. It appears some time has passed when Serena shows up. Dan goes back to being nervous, but still manages to land another date. Lily arrives and ropes the pair into brunch.
Yeah, and Dan and Serena meeting back up and recognizing that they're both just that they had an awkward end to a night, to a pretty messed up night. Mm-hmm. And
a lot happened.
A lot happened, and Dan kind of thought he shot his shot, and that was that. And then when so seeing them reconnect like that, it was a very cute scene. And also, at this point when Lily shows up and is insistent, once again insistent on them going to brunch, on Serena going to the brunch, and how she has to go. It's earlier when we said it's all out. Everybody knows. Lily didn't know, and Lily doesn't care that her daughter is sitting there saying, "This is not the one you want me to go to. This is not the reintroduction you want it to be."
Yes. So we do have everyone, all the principal characters in one place, so that makes for good television. So that works out. Inside the palace, Dan gawks at Bart Bass's brunch spread. It's opulent beyond anything he has ever experienced. The whole gang is here.
Yeah. Dan getting food and then talking to the statue. And then that's when, you have other glimpses of them throughout the show by this point. But this is when you actually, for the first time, they're treated like a person. When Dan is like, "Hey, how are you?" Tries to talk to them, is like, "Okay." just shows how out of place Dan feels, where everybody else there, it just didn't seem to faze them. Although they are brought up later. Chuck brings them up.
Yes.
And
I do like the same joke that's used in Year One with Michael Cera. I don't know if you've seen that.
I have not seen that.
Okay, yes. Same concept. You got human statues, and he walks up and tries to talk to them very awkwardly in a Michael Cera fashion.
Yeah.
And so also in the scene, we do get one of, I think, 3 uses of Rihanna Shut Up and Drive.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So apparently this brunch is sponsored by Rihanna. And then we get a scene back at the loft. Jenny and Rufus are talking about dresses. She's showing the dress that Blair gave her. Jenny finds a way to Rufus' heart, and by asking him to go to the farmer's market together.
Yeah, and they're sweet. I do love that again. The one of the better parent relationships with the kids as well. Sometimes maybe a little overwritten as the hero dad, but whereas the good dad, but it's just really well done. And
so it was obviously sweet, but I also got a sense that Jenny was almost manipulating Rufus a little bit.
Sure. Don't think Rufus doesn't know it.
Okay.
Now that could be my relationship with my kids, but my kids enjoy my company and my kids love doing stuff with me. And also, my kids sometimes, I no longer think of it as manipulation, right? Mm-hmm. And also my kids don't really have to manipulate me at this point, because it's hey, I want to come visit you and do this thing. I also want to go do this with my friends,
Yeah.
But my daughter will be oh yeah, we got to come down and watch horror movies or Buffy, but then I'm also going out with friends. And there is a level of manipulation, but it's also because my kids know they can come to me with that kind of stuff, and I'm go ahead and manipulate me. You want to manipulate me by going and spending time with me doing something we both love? I'll manipulate me. Do it.
I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
Anyways, back at brunch, Nate signals to Serena to have a private conversation, and Dan makes a class warfare joke, as you previously mentioned, talking to the human sculpture.
Yeah, okay. I thought that happened earlier, but yeah, it's just the first person to humanize the sculptures. It's uncomfortable and off-putting, and just like I said, the way everyone else, that's when you also realize that no one else is even paying attention to them. You could have statues. You could not have.
I don't know if you caught at the end of the episode that Chuck was, lounging with one of them.
Oh yeah, I thought it was more than one actually. I could be. I could have projected that, but for some reason I thought that it was him and
Well, it's definitely 2 girls at the beginning of the episode. I'm not sure if it was more than one at the end.
Yeah, but I do remember him waking up with one or lounging with one. I did make note of that in my head.
Yeah. All right, and then we are introduced to Bart Bass, who is riding Chuck pretty hard. Do we feel bad for Chuck at all?
No,
not yet.
Not yet. I mean, Chuck's dad sucks, right?
Yeah.
All their parents suck. But even Chuck's dad, of all the ways that the parents suck, Chuck's dad is, put away the scotch. It's not even noon yet.
Well, not before noon. Afternoon's fine.
Right. But the fact that he is the first. The only person to tell Chuck to not do
something,
to
curb your behavior at all.
Yeah.
Other than Dan punching him.
Yeah, exactly. And And so, like, I actually hated his dad, his parenting a little tiny bit less than everybody else's. Because I didn't feel like it was as railroady, because I feel like Chuck really likes the life that his dad is setting up for him. So far, that is my impression of Chuck. You know, I think this is what that Chuck is not in Nate's situation. You know, Chuck doesn't want to go follow his own path necessarily. I think Chuck wants to more Billy Madison his way through the hotel industry, but like, I do think that, like, that interaction isn't as, I understand a dad being frustrated with your kid showing up to the brunch that you're throwing so that he can socialize, and he shows up with a black eye because he was doing something fucked up. You can only imagine he's the reason. And then there's also, you can all take that back to, yeah, his dad obviously lets him get away with all of this shit too. And his dad is probably a big, has some accountability in Chuck just being the fucking creep he is. So, yeah. I mean, it is his kid. Like, he did raise a sexual predator.
Yes.
So, like, and where would that come from? Has statues that are, and like, even Chuck calls him out for having half-naked statues at this party.
Well, the same one too. Like, apparently, which also causes the question: have they both slept with the same statue?
Well, hopefully not at the same time. But wait, so they're father-son Eskimo brothers.
Yes. That's a highly likely
possibility that they are father-son Eskimo
at least
brothers.
After this,
at least by the end of the episode.
Yeah.
We're led to believe.
That Oedipal complex coming in. Because we see Chuck, like, mocking him about it in this first scene. And then he ends up with her at the end. So definitely some Oedipal stuff going on there.
Yeah. And we still have not had much about Chuck's mom outside of one reference in the pilot, correct? Yes. So so
at this time we're still assuming she's here.
Yeah,
she's in the picture
somewhere, but, like, we just don't know anything about her. But she's not attending these affairs and seems to be intentionally hidden from us.
Yes, and
she is apparent that there is an absence felt. They all have them, right? Mm-hmm. Do they all have a parent who we haven't seen? Serena's dad.
We haven't seen Serena's dad. We haven't seen Dan and Jenny's mom.
We haven't seen
We've gotten mentions of the mom, though, of Dan and Jenny's mom.
We've got mentions of Blair's dad, but we haven't seen Blair's dad.
Correct.
We haven't seen Nate's mom.
Correct.
Have we? Have we seen her and not interacted with her, or seen her but briefly?
It's hard for me to say because I've seen the show so many times, but
I don't feel an absence from Nate's mom, the way I do from every other character, Chuck's mom. Yeah. I guess that's all of them, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So then we have Nate in a quiet hallway convinces Serena to meet him in Chuck's suite. He gives her the key, so they're going to meet up and discuss,
Yeah, good idea, Nate.
Yeah. And then we see Blair and the captain, who is Nate's dad, chatting, and then Nate comes up and leaves with his dad. So this is awkward conversation.
Yeah. And once again, because is this where his dad's, like, trying to set him up with internships?
Yeah, as they walk away, he introduces some guy.
Yeah.
It's
and there's
Muck at some big company.
But it's once again the push of, like,
But But the conversation that we kind of jump in on between Blair and the captain of like, oh, your relationship is so good with my son, blah blah blah. It's like, that's so weird.
Yeah.
They're in high school, dude.
And then he talks to Nate about it, and he's like, you worked it all out, and it's like, man, like, you are too involved.
Taking care of business. He literally calls it business.
He calls it business. He does. Oh, like, God, this is like, it's your kid.
So messed up.
Yeah, like.
Anyway, so Chuck and Blair are talking about Serena being at the brunch, and Chuck tells Blair that she needs to seal the deal with Nate because he definitely hints that he knows about Serena and Nate.
Yeah. And she's like, you knew? And doesn't he say, like, I know everything or something like that?
Yes.
Yeah, he does indeed say, I know.
Actually, that's later, but yes, that's at the big confrontation.
It's interesting that a show about gossip has a character that says that they know everything.
Yeah. So Blair, he gives Blair the key to the suite and sends her up there. Do we think that Chuck knew that Serena was waiting up there already? Or was it just coincidence?
Chuck likes conflict. Chuck likes chaos. Chuck knows Nate has a key to the room. There is nothing that indicates that Chuck would know other than just Chuck. Other than just getting that suspicion of like, is he setting this up? And also like, he wants payback for Serena, for Serena having autonomy over her own body.
So I think we're kind of just left to wonder though. There's never really confirmed or denied if he knew or not.
Yeah, but like, there's that part of me that questioned the same thing, and seems like something he would do.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely fits with his character.
Yeah.
So speaking of which, Nate and Blair are making out when they burst in on Serena. Blair and Serena argue, quips fly, and Blair runs off to tell Dan about the Nate and Serena of it all.
Yeah, and it's so funny because, like, personally, like, when she's like, I'm going to go tell him. And, like, if somebody came up to me, well, I guess it's more of the next scene, but, like, if someone came up to me and was like, last year, before you knew any of us, she slept with my boyfriend, I'd be like, huh? Got it.
I mean, a lot of people like to blame Dan and say it's slut shaming, but I don't think that was the issue. I think it was more the issue that she's someone that would sleep with her best friend's boyfriend. Which is,
I don't believe Dan acted necessarily inappropriately based on what he said to her, right? Using Dan's words, because at first when he was walking out, and this might also jump ahead a little bit, but I feel like we can loop back into like the shoving Chuck and stuff like that. Because for one, by the time Dan leaves, like, Dan is a little bit surprised to hear it, right? Like, oh, you did that? Like, yeah, maybe I could see that, right? Especially you're a high school kid. Like, there is more of that element. There is more of that, but the flip side of that is that wasn't the thing that sent Dan away, right? Like, there was the conflict with Chuck. There was Chuck sitting there egging him on, talking about his sister. It was Blair talking about his Cabbage Patch Kid. It was Nate, who, if I remember correctly, wasn't really getting involved.
Or you're skipping ahead, so
my bad.
Yeah, we'll circle back to that. So we get Dan is looking for Serena outside and overhears Lily and Bart talking about some kind of relationship.
I skipped that.
Yes,
and it was her being like, no, I want to be with you, but I want to be with you in public.
But only you.
But only you. And you need to cut it off with all of your little jewelry girls.
Shop girls.
Shop girls. All your little shop girls. And he's like, oh, it takes time. She's like, they're 23. All they have is time. Like, I don't like Lily's parenting, but she is quick. You know? Like, she's sharp like
she's
that.
ready for another marriage.
Yeah.
She's not looking to just fuck around.
Yeah. Well, and Dan overhears this, and her fucking reaction is just like, I don't like you snooping. Like, lady, I walked out into a public space. Yeah. Well, and just like starts like, oh, I don't need Serena hearing this. Hearing what? I'm not
he's
part
he's ready to play right along.
Yeah.
He wants no part of it.
Yeah. And that's like that first real indication of like, I don't want to be in this world.
Yeah.
Which, you know, leads to where I was going later, but we'll get, you know.
So after that, we get Dan back inside, and he's confronted by Blair and Serena, and Chuck inserts himself, and everything comes out. The scene ends with Dan pushing Chuck into a waiter and storming off. And we get the great line from Gossip Girl. Some might call this a fustercluck.
A fustercluck. Yeah, that was good. That was nice. Well done. Well done, Kristen Bell.
And I also want to call out Leighton Meester's acting in this. She is so excited when she sees Dan. She's like panting, ready to drop the gossip.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, like eager. Completely, yeah. I love that.
And then we see Serena chasing Dan outside the hotel, and she catches him, and they discuss their relationship, but then part ways. Is this relationship already over?
Yeah. Well, and I want to go back to Dan leaving there, and like, you know, it wasn't, he gets this info bomb dropped on him, which could easily have turned into a, hey, can we go somewhere and talk about this? And his reaction wasn't great. His initial reaction wasn't great, but like, a bomb was dropped on a high school kid, and he reacted. But that wasn't what led to him storming off. It was, you know, Blair with the Cabbage Patch Kid. Nate was just like trying to simmer things down, if I remember correctly. Nate was not really active in it. And Nate has been neutral, I feel, throughout everything so far as Dan is concerned.
Yeah, I mean, Nate clearly, I think, does not like confrontation.
Yes.
He's a go with the flow. He's a stoner. He wants to, he doesn't want to get into any big arguments.
Yeah. 100%. And then you have and so Dan has all of this going on, and you have this guy who tried to assault your sister the night before, talking in your ear about your sister. Yeah, you're gonna shove him. And Dan didn't want to be at that brunch. Dan doesn't want to be a part of that. And when he left and Serena chased him out, his response wasn't, you slept with that guy. It was, you're a part of this world and I don't want to be. You know?
Mm-hmm.
And that's fair.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to be caught up in these brunches. And like and think about it. Dan sat there and saw she has no power over Lily to say no to go to these things. So if he's going to be with her, it's going to be, I have to go do this shit, or I have to know that you're going and being involved in all of it.
So, yes, Dan is definitely seeing this up close for the first time, but it seems like he should have known this because he's been basically stalking Serena for 2 years, and he goes to school with all these people, so
Yes.
It's kind of weird, but I don't know.
But at the same time, there was a woman who lived 2 doors down from me in college. And I first met her, we were in a PE class together. And she was gorgeous. And I hardly ever spoke to her at all, but from afar I just thought that she was gorgeous. And every time I would see her and smile and wave and stuff, but there was never any conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had this crush from afar and eventually met her. Eventually, she knew me by name, but we never became friends or anything like that, right? My point being, I don't know the intricacies of... She was in a sorority and I was in a fraternity, right? And that's how we ended up eventually becoming friends, because we would be in the same place at the same time for stuff. But I still never knew the intricacies of anything that was going on in her life or any of that stuff. I knew the general gossip of Greek life that was going on. Another show that I was watching, Greek, back then.
Yep, seen it.
But and I knew that there was drama because there was all over the place, but I didn't necessarily, if I would have gotten drawn into her world, I don't know what I would have seen then. I don't know what it would have looked like up close,
Mm. Well, I think we're going to take our second break. We'll be right back.
All right.
And we are back for the epilogue. Dan is sitting alone at the loft when Jenny and Rufus get home. Dan tells Jenny not to trust their classmates.
Yeah. And once again, Dan isn't pinpointing any one of them. Dan is saying that whole situation is toxic, which I now remember the earlier point that I had about that interaction between Blair and Jenny. And it's when Blair said, "Are you friends with Serena?" And she's like, "I have no reason not to be. But if someone else has a reason not to be, well, I have no problem with that either."
Yeah. That was Jenny playing the game.
Jenny at this point is looking like Bobby Fischer.
She's definitely a prodigy.
With these guys. Yeah, exactly. Like impressive. Because that's such a great political move, and it's an honest truth, too, you know? Jenny, part of Jenny's charm is her sincerity, and that Dan is really worried about her losing that in this group of people that Dan is seeing as very one-dimensional.
Mm-hmm. And then we see a scene of Blair and Nate lying in bed, obviously deciding to stick it out, but clearly neither of them are happy.
Yeah.
Just very cold.
Yeah, it's like Nate's... What the one big punishment Nate is really receiving is that he is still in a relationship that he doesn't want to be in. When he thought he was playing, his out card.
Yeah.
He thought he was pulling the ripcord, and when and the chute didn't open, and so he's like, well, here I am. And of course, how does Blair feel about that? But Blair is also like, well, this is the power dynamic, and this is... And I'm definitely not letting Serena have him. Fuck that.
And then we get Believe by Bravery plays as Gossip Girl monologues over a montage. Dan sitting alone on the fire escape. Little J trying on her new dress. Chuck icing his eye with one of the living sculptures. Serena is walking down the street distraught. First, she deletes all her photos and then proceeds to just throw her phone away.
The
Have you ever just thrown your phone away like that first? Yeah.
Well, I had that reaction, but then I also thought, in the life of excess that they're living, like, I'm just gonna, and also it was '07, so our lives weren't entirely our phones yet. Granted, hers is more her phone than the average person at that point. Like, iPhones came out later that year, right? The iPhones came out, I believe, that summer.
Possibly. I forget what year they first came out. I was a late iPhone adopter.
It was '07 because I've never had one, but like I was like, oh, what are these? I don't want a smartphone and I want my dumb phone. And I know it was '07 because it was the year my daughter was born.
Okay. There you go.
Yeah, and she was born in March, and I remember like the hype for the release, hearing about it in the summer leading up to the release. And I did have an iPod at the time.
Yeah, I did have one as well. But that is our episode.
I did want to bring up Chuck is icing his eye. Like, you got hit yesterday. What is it doing for you now? Like why didn't you ice it when you got home? Like, the swelling has already gone down. like why weren't you icing it yesterday?
Well, I guess Chuck never learns.
Yeah. Well.
Anyways, let's go ahead and get into some segments. First of all, we got the episode grades. You went first last week, so I will go first this week. I am going to knock this one down slightly. It was a very good episode, especially with the third act. The culmination at the end was classic Gossip Girl. I loved the way the director got in, like, very close shots and like jumping around. That's just like the strength of the Gossip Girl. Like, quick cuts, close up on all the faces, and quick witty dialogue. That's
good transitions. Yeah.
That was like the strength of that's Gossip Girl's like bread and butter there, as we'll come to see. But I will knock it down slightly because of that weird recap at the beginning and also that little teaser thing between acts. So I'm just gonna knock this one down to an A-.
Yeah, I would also kind of think that this I like this episode a lot. I like that a lot came out of it. Like, I like that a lot the exposition was done, and now we were on to like getting through the conflict and getting on with the conflict. And I really liked that. And so I would, but again, because of those points of the weird cuts in the beginning, I'd also probably give this one an A- as well. I thought that this was a little bit more developed in the pilot, but again, like I said last week, for a pilot it was an A, but for an overall show, but I thought that this one was a little bit more moved things along more.
I also have the advantage that I'm grading this on a Gossip Girl grading scale curve, so I know we got a long ways to go down from here.
Yeah, and also for me, like, it's I
need to be able to differentiate between what's really good and what's going to be not so good.
And me as a teacher, I always have the built-in thought of there always has to be something better, so there's always room for growth. So like, I tend to start a little harsh, and I mean, I do that in my teaching, and I do that in a way that is very like loving towards my students, and it's very much about like, yeah, this is great, but like, if we were done here, then what are we doing? Then why are you coming to me?
Yeah.
Like your whole
Mm-hmm.
reason for being in my classroom is to be better at this. So here's where you can be better. And so that's like a very big teacher thing in me, that I always leave room for something to be better.
All right.
Especially early on.
And then we are moving on to Stockwatch. Not too many people moving up this episode. Really, only for me is Jenny. She's the only one that moved up in this episode.
Yeah. Jenny's stock definitely went up. I would completely agree on that.
Yeah, and then but a lot of people went down. Nate and Blair both continue to go down for me. And then also, I mean, Chuck was kind of neutral in this episode. Most of the stuff that he did bad was more just stuff that was being said about him that happened in the past. But Dan and Serena both down this episode as well. They apparently have broken up and things are not going to work out.
Yeah, I would largely agree with that. I would agree that Dan and Serena's stock both went down. I think that Blair and Nate kind of stayed even in that like skating a thin line kind of way that the stock can do. Because I feel like Blair dipped in the episode at times. I think that she came up at times. And by the end of the episode, I feel like she kind of broke even. Nate, his stock went down. I mean, he caved to his dad. He's caving to Blair. He got caught trying to talk with Serena. Like, Nate's stock went down. And also, I'm going to say that for me, Chuck's stock continues to plummet because, in much the same way, like, even though it's stuff that's said about him on the outside, those things hurt stock. Industry rumors can really hurt stock, and everything I hear about Chuck just makes his stock drop more.
Fair. All right. Best outfit. I hate to say it, Chuck. That suit, I loved it. You had the white with the all stripe pinstripe suit, and then the pink, the 2 shades of pink pinstripe shirt. You got the little kerchief with the rosewood colored like designs on it, and then the white, I believe, crocodile skin loafers.
The suits fly, but flies look good on shit. So, the suit's great. Like, I love it. For me, I loved the Blair at the brunch, the like sort of classic, like almost doily kind of thing. Like, yeah. But like it's Blair dresses for power, right? Like Blair has a very feminine power aesthetic to her, which it's another going back to the scene where she gives the dress to Jenny, that she was trying on. She did not pick that dress. She has a very intentional look for the situations she puts herself in. And so, yeah, I loved that outfit. The other one, where I find that her outfits for the parties, her power outfits are always great. Serena's casual outfits are the ones that I always like on her. Because it's just like, they're not too flashy, but they just kind of hit. Also, honorable mention to Jenny's sweater. She had like a cool, like, pink pink knit sweater. Like, that was a really nice touch to that outfit too. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm guessing Rufus took her shopping at some like retro store to get that.
Yeah, exactly.
The other thing, do you think Blair and Chuck's outfits were kind of matching a little bit?
They were
standing next to each other.
Yeah, I never put that together, but like, yeah, they did. They could kind of go together. I do see it now that you mention it.
All right. Well, that does it for the segments. Do you have anything you want to plug this week?
Well, I'll start by letting everyone know that you can follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Non-Judging Breakfast Pod, and on social media, formerly known as Twitter, at NJB Pod. We're the Non-Judging Breakfast Pod on Facebook.
Also, if you like the show, we would really appreciate it if you would leave us a review on Spotify, Apple, or whatever you get your podcasts. It really helps with discoverability.
Yeah, I'll also mention that as per my request of my kids, I will be releasing my first Christmas album, tentatively titled Weed Wizards Christmas, sometime in early to mid-December. It might be more of an EP, but something's getting recorded and released.
All right, we'll make sure to post that on the socials when it drops. If you want to come check me out on Twitch, I stream JRPGs on Monday nights, and Wednesday nights we do story-based games, and then Fridays are Last of Us Factions. That's from 8 o'clock until 11 o'clock Eastern Time, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Twitch.tv/hot Capicola.
You can also find me on Cannabuzz at the Weed Wizard, and I do a morning metal show most days, so you can catch me there too.
We'll be back in 2 weeks to break down Season 1, Episode 3, Poison Ivy. Until next time, you know you love us. XOXO.
See you later.